Well, given the events of this week, which we've been talking about already all show, it did feel worth spending some time digging into the sheer political influence of the richest man in the world, Donald Trump's unelected billionaire backer, Elon Musk. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Musk inserted himself right in the middle of the spending fight on Capitol Hill this week. On Wednesday night, after a bipartisan deal had been negotiated and announced, Musk immediately began railing publicly against the bill. You might know he posted a ton about the bill. What you might not know is he posted a ton of things that were completely false. He said that the original bill funded a bioweapons lab. It didn't. He reposted a claim that the bill contained $60 billion for Ukraine, as well as mask and vaccine mandates. It didn't. Musk also reposted a claim that the bill included $3 billion for a new football stadium in D.C. Didn't include that either. But Musk, the richest man in the world and the owner of the social media site formerly known as Twitter, got what he wanted, and House Republicans killed the bill. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but an unelected billionaire with a lot of government contracts appearing to call the shots in Congress is not exactly a healthy sign of democracy. By the way, all that fear-mongering Republicans and the right wing have pushed about liberal billionaire donors like George Soros all seems pretty rich right now, considering what Elon Musk has been up to over just the last couple of days. I mean, right now, Musk is basically flaunting his influence in order to bully elected lawmakers and government officials. He has singled out relatively unknown federal officials and workers whose jobs he wants to cut, and he has already warned Republicans standing in his and Trump's way that he will fund primary challengers against them. That's one of their favorite threats these days. And as we look at all that influence, I think it's important to point out that his actual positions are at times indiscernible from your average red-pilled poster on 4chan. He has said that the woke mind virus is a threat to modern civilization. He has repeatedly echoed the white supremacist great replacement theory. He said that Europe is headed towards civil war due to the arrival of refugees. And this week, he even expressed support for a far-right party in Germany. In the midst of the spending fight in Washington, Musk tweeted that only the AfD can save Germany. Now, for those of you who don't know, the AfD promotes an ethno-nationalist and Islamophobic message. Its youth wing has been classified as confirmed extremist by Germany's domestic intelligence agency. Some of its leaders have broken German laws by repeating Nazi slogans, and it has ties with known neo-Nazis. So that is the kind of thing that Elon Musk has decided to promote to his 200 million followers. That's what he's using his platform for. Like I said, in some ways, there's just not that much that separates Musk from a run-of-the-mill internet troll. He spreads misinformation. He celebrates extremism. He does it to basically stir the pot. The only difference, and this is a big one, is he's also the richest man on earth, who owns and operates one of the biggest social media megaphones in the world, and who basically controls the president of the elect of the United States. And that, my friends, is a very dangerous combination. Coming up, Donald Trump is enlisting the help of House Republicans in his retribution campaign, and they are setting their sights on Liz Cheney. So one of the things that was overshadowed by the spending fight in Congress this week is that House Republicans are already trying to help Trump deliver on his promise of retribution in his second term. In a report released this week, they called for an FBI investigation into former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, baselessly accusing her of witness tampering, among other things, in connection with the testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson. Now, the problem, as you might imagine, is that their allegations don't pass the smell test. Of course they don't. In fact, their case is so flimsy, it's already falling apart under scrutiny. But that's not actually the point here, because I don't think these Republicans care. Their goal is to tee up, I think, but I'm going to talk to my next guest about this, a federal investigation of Liz Cheney on false pretenses, which would save Trump the trouble of ordering one himself. Of course, Trump is also pushing these accusations, characterizing them today as, quote, egregious and unthinkable acts of crime, which they definitely are not. Joining me now is our friend and former acting U.S. Solicitor General, the best explainer out there, Neal Katyal. Okay, Neal, this allegation against Liz Cheney is pretty baseless. We've said that. Everybody said that. But I think it's really important for our viewers to understand why.
So it's kind of nuts, Jen, to think that the one crime that occurred around January 6th was not the hundreds of people who invaded the Capitol or the leadership that led to that insurrection, but rather the crime was the investigation into January 6th. But that's what this House report evidently says, that Cassidy Hutchinson, one of the witnesses against Trump, had counsel, and that Liz Cheney ignored her counsel and just went and talked directly to Cassidy Hutchinson and procured another lawyer for Cassidy Hutchinson and the like. This is just bogus. It is true that there is a crime in the statute book, 1622, that bars someone from procuring another person to commit perjury. Here, all Liz Cheney did was say to Cassidy Hutchinson, hey, you've got a Trump-affiliated lawyer who evidently is not letting you tell the truth. Here's a list of some other lawyers who could represent you. That is not witness tampering. Witness tampering is when you're preventing someone from telling the truth, and here Liz Cheney was enabling Cassidy Hutchinson to tell the truth. This is not a crime, no way.
This is such an important point. She was trying to enable her to tell the truth publicly to the American people. That was what the objective was here. So I raise this, but I'm really curious, most importantly, what you think, because it may be that some of these Republicans recognize this as a little flimsy, but part of the question is, what's the point here? And part of the point, some of it speculated, is that it's to predicate, to justify a DOJ investigation. I mean, that's not how it's supposed to work, but are you worried that Trump's FBI could use this as a pretext to try to launch a probe?
They could try, but Jen, it would fail right at the get-go, not just because there's no crime here or any credible allegation, but also because Liz Cheney, as a member of Congress at the time, is entitled to the constitutional protection of speech or debate immunity. It's actually in the Constitution, unlike Trump's claim about being absolutely immune when he was president. It's in there, it would prevent it. So I don't think that's what's going on. Why are we hearing about all this conversation right now in December? I think because the Republican Party is thinking about what's going to happen on January 20th. And one of the things Donald Trump wants to do is pardon the hundreds of people who were involved in the January 6th insurrection. And they've already been convicted. They've gone through jury or other trials and the like. I think what Trump is trying to do here is to bait President Biden into pardoning Liz Cheney, and that'll allow Trump to say, hey, look, even Biden thinks Liz Cheney did something wrong by pardoning these people. This investigation is bogus. Now I need to remedy what's left and pardon all these January 6th people. So I think that's really what's going on, a hope that Biden will use the pardon power to protect Liz Cheney, and then that'll enable Trump to use it for the January 6th insurrectionists.
Oh, gosh, that's a lot of getting in the minds of a lot of people, but it sounds pretty right on to me. You've advised a lot of people. I mean, the thing about these congressional committees, this is not how it's supposed to work. They have subpoena power, right? They're supposed to use that to get to the bottom of the truth. I mean, if you were advising Liz Cheney, who hasn't hidden, she's called this malicious, what would you tell her to do in this case?
Oh, I think, she'll fight and there'll be no problem for her. I mean, there's no crime here, not even the hint of one, and she's protected by immunity. So I suspect this is a fight that, she wants to have. Liz Cheney is one of the last remaining symbols of a principled GOP. And this new GOP isn't going to try and stop until her memory is erased. But I think it's very important that she continue what she started.
Neal Katyal, thank you so much. Always one of the best explainers in the business and legal minds. Appreciate you joining us. Coming up, Democrats pass up a big opportunity to elevate one of their youngest.
Joining us now, Congressman Gerry Connolly of the Commonwealth of Virginia, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and the incoming ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. As always, Congressman Connolly, thank you for coming to the Saturday show. Your thoughts and reaction to the chaos on Capitol Hill at the behest, really, of Elon Musk.
So I think it's really ominous for the incoming Republican majority in the Congress. There were three big losers this week. Donald Trump, who got eclipsed by an unelected billionaire who, as you pointed out, was ranting and raving with 150 tweets filled with disinformation, self-interest, self-dealing, made up fabricated facts. Distortions. And all of this was designed by President Trump and Elon Musk to essentially sneak in a debt ceiling extension so they can get a $2.5 trillion tax cut next year in reconciliation. That failed miserably. 38 Republicans, in the face of a threat of primary challenges, said, we're not going to do that. The second big loser, Speaker Mike Johnson. I think his speakership is on life support going into January 3rd, and I think we're probably going to face multiple votes on a new speaker because he showed the Peter Principle par excellence. He rose to the highest level of his own incompetence, and it was painfully public. And the third big loser, of course, is the Republican majority itself. All of the striations, all of the fractures are painfully evident to the public and to you and me that they don't have it. They can't get a working majority. It's a very unstable caucus.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and then there's Elon Musk. And I think that's a very troubling development that an unelected South African billionaire would intrude in the legislative process as intimately as he did. And it's even more troubling that, unfortunately, on the Republican side of the aisle, there were a lot of bootleggers willing to go along with that.
Now, I'm glad you brought up the central role that Elon Musk played in the drama this week, because a lot of people are saying, you know, as we showed your colleague, Congresswoman DeLauro, just calling him, you know, President Musk. Donald Trump's spokesperson, incoming press secretary Caroline Leavitt, put out this statement, said President Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, full stop. But is that really true? Because all hell broke loose on Capitol Hill, not because of anything Donald Trump said, but because of what Elon Musk said.
I think that's right. It was Elon Musk who was driving the derailment of the original bill. It was Elon Musk who tried to get initially the debt ceiling extension in the second bill. So it wasn't Donald Trump. Donald Trump came late to the game. And I think it really kind of showed a weakness in the president-elect that had not been there heretofore or suspected heretofore. And it, as I said, raises really profound questions about who is this unelected billionaire who apparently is calling the shots for the president-elect and his transition team even before they're sworn into office.
Now, let's talk more about the speaker's race. Because that's going to happen. This is the 118th Congress we're in now. The 119th Congress is the first order of business is to swear them in, to swear you into another term. And then the very first order of business, once you're all sworn in, is to vote on a new speaker. There were people on Capitol Hill, and I don't have their names in front of me. I think it's Senator Rand Paul was one of them, maybe even Marjorie Taylor Greene in the House saying, Elon Musk should be the Speaker of the House. I can't even take that seriously. Who in the Republican caucus, if not Mike Johnson, could be the next Speaker?
I think we saw that game before, right? We had multiple votes, multiple candidates. Steve Scalise, the majority leader, had to drop out. Tom Emmer, their political guy, had to drop out. Jim Jordan faced daunting odds trying to get the election and had to drop out. And finally, they find this obscure Louisiana legislator no one's ever heard of before, Mike Johnson, and they say, well, how about you? Because there were no objections to him. That was the qualification. That really was a sorry statement about the talent that can rise to the top on the Republican side of the aisle. And I think they're going to face similar problems come January 3rd.
All right, now let's talk about your side of the aisle, the Democratic side of the aisle. You won the race to be the ranking member in the House Oversight Committee. You ran against Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You won decisively, 131 votes to 84 votes. What does that say, do you think, to the American people about where the Democratic Party is?
So I think there's been a lot of nonsense, frankly, on the generational change. What the Democratic caucus did was try to put their best generals on the battleground. Who's qualified? Who has proved their mettle? Who's got the skill set? And it had nothing to do with how old people were. It had to do with do they bring capability? Can they function? And that was the choice before my caucus. Alexandria's a rising star, has a lot of talent, but she's 3 terms. I'm going to begin my 9th. I've got a lot of experience. I know the committee backward and forward. I've been involved in every major issue in 16 years. I know how to take on the Republicans. I'm known as a bulldog. Those are skill sets we need as we face 4 more years of Trump and an unstable Republican majority.
I mean, yeah, 4 more years of Trump. Are you ready to go toe-to-toe with not only the Republicans in the House, but maybe even also with the President of the United States?
I've done it before. So we beat Trump on the citizenship question and the census on my committee, and I helped lead that effort with the late Elijah Cummings. We beat him on abolishing the Office of Personnel Management, the HR agency for the entire federal government, which would have been disastrous and chaotic. We beat him on the issue of ascertainment. If you remember, after he lost the election, the head of the Government Service Administration had the power to ascertain who won the election. She wouldn't do it. And by not doing it, there was no transition. We forced her to do it. So we have a track record of beating Trump in his own game, in his own administration, and we're going to do it again.
Okay, Congressman, that's legislative successes. But what about when it comes to messaging? Because there's a lot of, when you listen to a lot of Democrats, it's always our messaging is wrong. Our messaging is wrong. We don't have the right messages, the right messaging, and we don't have the right messengers. And folks are looking to AOC because she's younger, has more followers on social media, that she was the person who could do that. Talk about the messaging piece of this.
So I built the Democratic majority. I was one of the key architects of building a Democratic majority from a Republican majority in Northern Virginia across the river. And it is now solidly Democratic. I did that by specializing in message. Take progressive ideas, but make them common sense, kitchen table language for the average voter. We failed to do that in the last election, and we got punished for it. So no esoteric language. No judgmental language, no finger pointing and lecturing. Let's meet voters where they are with our ideas, which we know are popular, but the language describing them is flawed. And so I'm an expert in doing that, and that's what we're going to do. We've got to be disciplined. We've got to be strategic. And by the way, we do know how to do it. Joe Biden beat Donald Trump as the incumbent president by 7 million votes. It's not like we don't know how to do it, but I think we lost our way.
Final question for you, Congressman, and a personal one. You announced in November that you were diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus, and you immediately started chemo and immunotherapy. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I feel very strong, as you can tell.
Yeah,
I've lost a little weight, but the prognosis is good. I just talked, in fact, to my doctor today, and the tests coming back are really, really hopeful and positive. So I feel full of, energy and ready to take on this task. And I was very gratified that in explaining that to my colleagues, they ratified and validated my candidacy for this job.
George Bailey is a community banker who faces a room full of panicked customers who think that his small-town bank is going to fail. They're threatening to withdraw their savings, but the bank, which pays interest on those savings and then lends that money to others to buy things like houses, doesn't have enough cash on hand to refund all of its depositors. So George convinces the depositors to accept a smaller amount, which he covers personally. And that is the famous bank run scene from the 1946 classic, It's a Wonderful Life.
Don't you see what's happening? Potter isn't selling, Potter's buying. And why? Because we're panicky and he's not. That's why. He's picking up some bargain. Now, we can get through this thing all right. We've got to stick together, though. We've got to have faith in each other.
But my husband hasn't worked in over a year, and I need money.
How am I going to live until the bank opens?
I got doctor bills to pay. I need cash.
I can't keep margins on faith. I've got to have...
How much do you need?
Hey! I got $2,000. Here's $2,000. This will tide us over to the bank reopen.
Now, I'm not just playing that clip because it's a Christmas classic. It's also a perfect depiction of a bank run. And it underscores the role of the FDIC, or the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And some on the Trump transition team could learn a lesson or two from it. The incoming administration has reportedly started looking at ways to drastically shrink, consolidate, or even eliminate the top bank regulators in Washington. According to the Wall Street Journal, quote, in recent interviews with potential nominees to lead bank regulatory agencies, President-elect Donald Trump's advisors and officials from his newfound Department of Government Efficiency have, for example, asked whether he could abolish the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, end quote. Let me tell you why this is a really bad idea. The FDIC was created during the Great Depression after thousands of banks began to fail. Many Americans lost their savings. Those who didn't lose their money right away panicked and withdrew their deposits, causing what's known as a bank run and causing more banks to close. That scene in It's a Wonderful Life was familiar to many Americans back then. Today, it's more difficult for most of us to relate to that movie scene, and that is thanks to the FDIC. The agency was created to restore and maintain the public's confidence in the financial system, and it worked. The FDIC began insuring banks in January of 1934, creating stability in the banking system. Banks and savings associations would basically pay small premiums for deposit insurance companies by the FDIC. It's called an insurance corporation. At the end of 1934, only 9 banks had failed, compared to the more than 9,000 banks that had failed in the previous 4 years. Today, the broad purpose of the FDIC is to protect your money in the event of a bank failure. It does so through deposit insurance. The FDIC insures trillions of dollars in deposits at almost every major bank and savings association in the United States. The agency will insure at least $250,000 per depositor at FDIC-insured banks. Since its creation, no American banking consumer has lost money that was in an FDIC-insured account, even when the bank fails. The FDIC has also kept an eye on financial institutions to make sure that things are operating soundly and consumers remain protected. And if a bank does fail, the FDIC runs point on that, too. It works to find a solution for the banks and limits the effect that a bank failure might have on the broader economy. It was common during the Great Recession for a bank to fail and shut its doors on a Friday, for customers to have access to their funds from an ATM over the weekend, and for the bank to reopen under new ownership on a Monday morning, all courtesy of the FDIC. Sheila Bair, former FDIC chair during that Great Recession, when some major American banks failed, says if the agency were to shutter, it would be a big mistake. She says, quote, FDIC has a perfect record of protecting insured deposits for over 90 years. Treasury has no expertise in handling bank failures. Changing the guarantor would create confusion among depositors who are comforted by the FDIC insured sign at their banks, end quote.
Shutdown averted this morning after the House and Senate finally overcame Republican chaos to pass a government spending bill. President Biden signed it. All government agencies may now continue their normal operations. The continuing resolution that Congress managed to pass will keep the government funded until March 14th of next year. It also includes $100 billion in disaster relief, an additional $10 billion in aid for farmers, and an extension of the Farm Bill. One issue the bill does not address is the debt ceiling, a big part of Trump's 11th hour demand that sent Congress members scrambling earlier this week. But House Republicans say that they have agreed to a plan to deal with it early next year. Now, what's notable here is not that the House and Senate passed a government spending bill. That should be standard operating procedure. What's notable here is actually how we got to this moment. Congressional leaders had lined up on Tuesday to approve a spending bill that would avert a shutdown. But a 5-word social media post by an unelected South African native turned Washington upside down for 4 days. This bill should not pass, declared the world's richest man, Elon Musk, on the social media platform he owns. Well, he seems to also own Congress and the incoming Trump administration at this point, because that post began a process that brought the U.S. government to the very brink of a shutdown. In the 12 hours after that post, he made more than 60 new posts, many filled with misinformation, that forced the bill to be scrapped. And he included a threat. Any member of the House or Senate who votes for this outrageous spending bill deserves to be voted out in 2 years. Now, this incident has raised a serious question about the Republican Party and Trump's next term in office. Who's actually in charge here? Donald Trump or his top donor and the world's richest man? This is what Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson had to say yesterday, just after the House passed the spending bill.
I was in constant contact with President Trump throughout this process, spoke with him most recently about 45 minutes ago. He knew exactly what we were doing and why, and and this is a good outcome for the country. I think he certainly is happy about this outcome as well. Elon Musk and I talked within about an hour ago, and we talked about the extraordinary challenges of this job. And I said, hey, you want to be Speaker of the House? I don't know.
Now, let's just for a moment here stop, because have we ever seen anything like this? An unelected billionaire this publicly central to the passage of a bill in Congress? And second of all, why would Musk want to be the House Speaker? It seems that would be a demotion for him at this point. I mean, the events of the past week have led some Democrats to actually poke fun at Trump for seeming to play second fiddle to the real man in charge. Look at these AI-generated images. I think they capture the sentiment pretty accurately. But is this really a joke? People are already going above his head and dealing with Elon Musk directly. Trump has already served one term in office and can't run for re-election again. He is now the oldest man ever elected president. He's already failed to get his party to support his first attorney general nominee, Matt Gaetz. And after threatening primary challenges against any Republican who voted to fund the government without dealing with the debt limit, 170 House Republicans just defied him. So I think it's fair to ask at this moment, is Donald Trump really in charge? Or has he already become a lame duck president before he's even sworn into office? Kicking us off tonight is Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of California. Congressman, it's great to have you back on the show. Have you, in all of your time in politics, sir, ever seen an unelected figure and a top political donor play such a overt role in such detailed degree in legislation that Elon Musk has done now?
Never have I ever seen it. There's always people out there that are in contact with the elected officials, governors, presidents, and the like. But I've never seen one that is so, as you said, overt, public, and out in front and threatening members of Congress or the legislatures or whomever. This is most unusual. And frankly, it raises very, very serious concerns about who actually is going to be running this government. Is it Trump or is it President Musk? We'll see what happens here, but there's a very, very serious concern that all of us, Democrats and Republicans, have. And when Johnson said, oh, yes, I did talk to the president, about an hour ago, I also talked to Musk. That's what's happening here. We have a new person in charge, and it's the richest man in the world who has taken the front position on the very initial issues of the new administration.
As you saw and as you know, in order to avert the shutdown, Mike Johnson, Speaker Johnson, had to work with Democrats to get this passed. Of course, Republicans have an extremely thin majority. He appears to have been really weakened by this mess with his caucus. Does he have any chance of winning the vote for House Speaker in January?
Well, he may have to rely upon the Democrats. The Democrats have put forth all of the votes necessary to move every important piece of legislation over the last 2 years of the 118th Congress. And we did it again Friday with the passage of the final compromise continuing resolution. So we'll continue to do that. In the new Congress, 119th, which begins on January the 3rd, even more dependent on the Democrats will be the Republicans, and therefore more dependent on the Democrats will be the Trump administration, because it is impossible, at least up to now, and probably next year, for the Speaker to rally the necessary Republican votes.
If this past week, Congressman, was any indication, it's safe to assume that next year it's going to get very messy with Republicans in control of the House, with different factions within the Republican movement at odds with one another, certainly between the White House, the Senate, and the House. How do you think Democrats should balance reaching across the aisle to get things passed, like the spending bill, versus sitting back and watching the Republicans fight among themselves, like we saw for most of this week?
Well, do exactly what Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats did, and that is to use our leverage. That is, they need our votes in order to keep the government open and running, or to solve any particular important problem, and use that to make sure that the Democratic priorities, which are very straightforward, we want to make sure that the working men and women, the families in America, are benefiting from every piece of legislation. So if you're a teacher, a nurse, a truck driver, or an equipment operator, or a farmer, that you will find the Democrats using the very slim majority that the Republicans have and their inability to get their act together, thereby giving the Democrats the opportunity to put forth policies that help the working men and women and the families of America. We have no interest whatsoever in helping the plutocrats, the billionaire class. They have quite enough already, and it's going to come down to a very significant brawl in the early months next year when Trump tries to put forth his $2 trillion tax cut, 80 to 90% of which will go to folks like Elon Musk, the super wealthy. We're not going to support that. We're going to, if there's a tax cut, it's going to be for the working men and women, the wage earners of America.
This may be somewhat speculative, so feel free to ignore the question, but what do you think Musk's motivation is in this? Like, why do you think he wanted to play this role the way he did with this specific piece of legislation and threatening people that who voted for it, that they could be voted out of office in 2 years? And he's somebody who certainly has the means to field primaries against candidates he does not like.
Well, certainly he threatened every 435 members of Congress. Well, I guess there's about 430 of us right now. He threatened all of us, said, you vote for this, I'm going to take you out. Well, he's going to have to spend a lot of money and a lot of his time to do that. But the fact of the matter is, what is his motivation? Clearly, he's the richest man in the world. Clearly, he can spend money. Clearly, he can put it into campaigns, and he's proven that already. But I think it's also an ego issue. And we have two of the most monumental egos that are going to be contending for the front of the stage, Elon Musk and Donald Trump. It's going to be interesting to see how this works out. My guess is there's going to be a conflict. There'll be a clash. At some point, the real president, I guess that's Musk. Excuse me, it's not Musk. The real president, Trump, is going to say, wait a minute, I'm the one that got elected. And Elon's going to say, yeah, with my $270 million, you got elected. So it's going to be an interesting clash between the two of them. But there's also more, and I think in depth to this. The ranking member of the Appropriation Committee, Rosa DeLauro, put out a letter about Elon Musk's close and financial ties to the U.S. government. Yeah. It's a very important piece of information that I'm sure will be out in the public even more. And basically, Elon Musk has over $20 billion of contracts with the federal government. And also, one of the things that he was able to kill in the by killing the initial deal that was put together, the bipartisan bicameral deal, was a clause that would prohibit American companies from investing in certain industries in China, including factories that produce batteries.
Interesting.
Guess who has underway one of the largest factories for the production of batteries in China? Elon Musk. Yeah. So we'll see. There's going to be an enormous conflict of interest here.
Hello, Leader Jeffries. Great to see you. I just wanted to start by asking you, I just gave my take on what a chaotic, hectic week this was, where Democrats essentially saved the day. But what did you learn from this week?
Well, it was important for the American people to see the beginnings of what is going to take place over the next 2 to 4 years, which is chaos, dysfunction, and extremism, and a Republican Party that is not really interested in helping out working class Americans, but is really determined to enact massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and well-connected corporations. That was the centerpiece of Donald Trump and Elon Musk's demand with respect to recklessly trying to suspend the debt ceiling and secure a $4 to $5 trillion blank check. Thankfully, we stopped that from happening.
It's been quite a week, and one of the things I talked about a bit here, Leader Jeffries, is that Elon Musk, we saw Elon Musk take kind of a powerful role in his power over the Republican caucus. That surprised me, I guess. Maybe it shouldn't have. Did anything about how he wielded his power surprise you?
Well, many people throughout the Capitol are saying that he has perhaps emerged as the leader of the Republican Party moving forward. And we'll have to see how that plays itself out over the next few weeks, next few months, and next few years. As House Democrats, our position is simple. There are three things that we should all be focused on in connection with the American people. First, lowering costs. Second, bigger paychecks for hardworking American taxpayers. And third, securing safer communities. That's going to be our North Star moving forward. And we'll see whether the incoming administration is prepared to join us on behalf of the American people.
I know there were some, I listed a number of them, pieces that were in this bipartisan agreement that were stripped out of the bill before it went to the Senate. Some of them were saved in the Senate. But because of this whole chaos of this week, there has been questions about whether Mike Johnson is at risk of not being the Speaker of the House in a couple of weeks. What do you think?
I think that's a real risk, and there will be no Democrats available to save him or the extreme MAGA Republicans from themselves based on the breaching of a bipartisan agreement that reflected priorities that were good for the American people. We're going to have to continue to work on several of those as we move forward, including plussing up resources for community health centers, which is a bipartisan priority that Republicans walked away from, even though it benefits people in urban America, rural America, small town America, the heartland of America, as well as Appalachia. But we'll have the ability to wage those battles over the next few weeks and the next few months, given that this is only a short-term continuing resolution that will expire on March 14th.
And that means that vote, just for everybody paying attention at home, is going to come up again. There's going to be a need to raise the debt limit to keep the government funding. I just listed how there were 170 Republicans, or 100 more than that, who voted for this bill, even though Trump was threatening primary opponents. Do you think, you've been through this before, you were in the minority the last time, not in as powerful a position. Do you think he's lost a hold on the caucus that he had before?
That's an open question, and it will be very interesting, but that certainly is one of the narratives that perhaps has emerged over the last few days in terms of what we saw in the Congress, a willingness by some of my colleagues, including far-right extremists in the House Republican Conference, to defy Donald Trump around the debt ceiling in particular, which means that notwithstanding their plan to stick the American people with trillions of dollars of debt in order to jam tax cuts down the throats of the American people, in part by cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits, that Democrats will remain united in pushing back against that. And Donald Trump is going to have to find the votes for that reckless scheme amongst House Republicans and House Republicans alone.
Is there anything from navigating being in the minority during a first term that you're applying now as leader of the caucus?
It's important for us to stay calm, stay present at all times, because the margin is going to be extremely narrow during the first 100 days of the new administration. The margins will be about 217 Republicans and 215 Democrats. Even at full strength, House Republicans will be at 220, will be at 215. That's the narrowest majority of any party since 1931. And so we've got to stay calm through all of the turbulence that the Republicans are going to try to visit on the American people in order to defend hardworking American taxpayers. We have to be present and in Washington to make sure that our leverage can shine through on behalf of the American people. And we, of course, have to stay unified in fighting for the things that matter, which first and foremost is to lower costs for everyday Americans, for working class Americans, and for middle class Americans.
One of the pieces that came out of the November election that I don't think has got enough attention is that Democratic House candidates outperformed the top of the ticket, which I think, as we're looking for bright lines or lessons to be learned, is an important thing to reflect on. Why do you think that was? And how does that inform how you and other party leaders are thinking about the best messengers for the party moving forward?
We have incredible members of the House Democratic Caucus who are returning, who are in battleground districts all across the nation, and we're overwhelmingly successful. We have some red to blue candidates who were able to defeat Republicans. In fact, in this most recent election, we flipped a total of 10 Republican-held seats this year, and we were able to hold some tough districts as well. And I think it was in part because all of our members and all of our candidates focused on quality of life issues, lowering gas prices, lowering grocery prices, lowering the cost of housing, which is a challenge that impacts Americans all across the country. And we're able to overcome a national environment that was more adverse than what we expected. It's also important to note, Jen, as you know, that in the last Trump presidency, when the former president took office in January of 2017, there were 241 Republicans and only 194 Democrats. So the margin this time is going to be entirely different. And that's why we're going to fight as hard as we can to deliver real results for the American people and protect the things that matter, like Social Security, Medicare, and of course, a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions.
I think people are really happy to hear all of those priorities. So you have this new book. I mentioned it at the top. I have it for my kids. It's called The ABCs of Democracy. It's based on the first speech you gave as Democratic leader, which people can pop up and find. We'll repost it too. When you went letter by letter through the alphabet, I'm sure that took planning, to talk about what the Democratic Party stands for. It's quite relevant now, and it was a memorable speech. But tell us what you hope young people get out of this book.
Well, it's an illustrated book for people of all ages, and certainly I'm hopeful that younger Americans will have an opportunity to process that elections come and elections go, presidents come and presidents go, but there are American values, American institutions, American ideas that have endured over a 248-year period that have made this country the greatest democracy in the history of the world. I was in part inspired by my younger days growing up on Schoolhouse Rock, and just thought that these are principles that we have to continue to bring to life for the next generation of Americans.
I hope it's a good generation. We have a lot of hope in them. Before I let you go, we're all getting ready for Christmas. What are you most looking forward to this Christmas? You rarely get a break.
Looking forward to spending some time with family, spending some time in the community, spending some time in church, and watching the Knicks.